So we have the great pleasure this afternoon of I have the pleasure of being in conversation. You have the pleasure of witnessing the great conversation with the great Roxane Gay.
Thank you.
Yeah, look. I want to start with the beginning of this book, The Portable Feminist Reader, which is an extraordinary collection. And the beginning you talk about how you and your wife are in the midst of the COVID lockdown, watching first Columbo, and I forget what was second, but then, but LA Law.
LA Law.
Right?
Classic.
Classic. And I remember it vaguely, like, we were kids, but it was on, right? And how horrific the gender politics of the show were.
They're so bad. They're so bad. And it was interesting because we were catching up. I had never seen Columbo, and Columbo's great. He's wrinkled and he's chewing on his cigar, and he's gonna, he knows from 5 minutes in who did it. And he's just gonna sort of toy with them, and that's very fun. And each episode was like an hour and a half to 2 hours long. Those were the days. It was really good. But then we moved on when we finished Columbo, like all Columbo, to LA Law. And oftentimes young feminists ask me, have we made any progress? And the answer is absolutely. As grim as things are, it was so much worse. And nothing can highlight it in more accessible ways than pop culture, because the misogyny on LA Law is bad. Yeah. It is so bad. Yeah. There are so many sort of rape-adjacent scenarios and stalking and condescension. Like, people really didn't think Jill Eikenberry's character could manage marriage, motherhood, and the law. And it's like, have you met a mother? Of course she can manage all of this. You guys do it with no other sort of responsibilities. And so it's bad.
It was bad.
It was, and we actually stopped watching LA Law. Columbo was fine, but LA Law, that was a bridge too far.
And then you make the point, right? So it's terrible, and so even as bad as things are, part of what you say is there's this awareness that we have made gains. Because there's moments when people will say, nothing ever changes. And I really appreciate the way you cue up. You say, no, things have changed. And then you also do, I love the move because you do that, right? Things have changed, though things are bad again. And then also you say, there's this idea of this literary canon that are canons in various fields. And we say that there's been this critique of canons in feminist thought, but there are canonical texts. And I love that setup because then you give us this collection, which is, and I'm gonna ask you a little bit about the collection, and I wanna talk about feminism broadly, but you give us this collection which is organized in an unconventional way, but a really useful way so texts that'll help us understand the world we live in and where we might go, hopefully. And so there's this sort of, yes, there should be critiques of canons, but yes, we do need some core texts that help us understand the world we live in, right? And so first you give us this read of this very popular television show, and then you give us texts, you tell us that you're giving us texts that actually help us read things like that, but also the landscape we currently live in. So can you talk just a little bit about how you decided to do this book and organize it?
Yes, Penguin approached me several years ago and asked if I wanted to edit the next edition of the Feminist Reader that they put out, and I was like, maybe. But in honesty, I was very excited to do it, because oftentimes when you read these collections, they're very static, they're very monochromatic, and they don't necessarily reflect the breadth and depth of feminist thought from really a diverse range, and diverse in every way, a diverse range of writers, thinkers, and scholars. And so to be able to do that was a really great opportunity. And oftentimes these anthologies focus on much older work, and the reason is because they're free and in the public domain. And permissions are very expensive for especially writers who are still alive or who have very active estates. And so it was a balancing act of budget, but also necessity, and feeling like we have to be able to include contemporary voices because feminism is very much alive. There are amazing feminist writers who are putting their work into the world, and I wanted to showcase some of that. And I also wanted to show people that feminist scholarship can manifest in a range of different genres and different ways from different voices, so that it wouldn't be as static as previous, absolutely valid anthologies, but different from what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and you had, and one of the other pieces that you talk about, is your collection, Bad Feminist, from a little over a decade ago, right? And so, I mean, in some ways that becomes, I think, the entry point for many young feminists to having a sense of a kind of feminism that they could connect to. And then you talk about, sort of in hindsight, both the insights and the significance of that, but also something about how you are in a different place now than you were when you wrote that essay and the collection under that. Yeah,
definitely. A lot of times, and we see this especially now, young women and some young men ask if there's a place for them in feminism. And the answer is always going to be yes, but sometimes you have to make that place. Sometimes it's not as obvious a place as you want it to be so that it's easy and seamless. And so when I was writing Bad Feminist, the title essay, and also the essays in that collection, I really was thinking about my relationship to feminism and the way in which we tend to frame feminism as something that it's not, actually. A lot of times people like to dismiss feminism and say, of course, feminists are humorless and hate men, and, well, and things that are not true and are not at all exemplified by feminism in practice. And so to be able to then bring some of that ethos into this collection and continue to invite people to engage with the feminist project was very exciting. And I also feel that it was very necessary, because so often we just dismiss feminism as something that's no longer needed, or we dismiss feminism as a failed project, when feminism is alive and well. It is doing very well. It is just up against a very patriarchal and very powerful force that does not want to cede any of its own power. And whenever you come up against that kind of resistance, of course, it's going to seem like everything you're trying is failing, but you try nonetheless.
So the lead essay, so the first section is called Laying a Foundation, and we start with Kimberly Crenshaw, Demarginalizing the Intersection of Race and Sex. I have some sense of why it's important to begin, but can you say something about why it was important to begin with her?
I started with Kimberly Crenshaw because I wanted people to have a framework within which to then digest everything that followed. And so the essays in the first section are, let's make sure that we have some common vernacular as we start to engage with everything that follows the first section. And in Mapping the Margins, what Crenshaw is talking about is trying to understand difference and identity, and that the ways of the world, the forces of the world, don't affect all of us equally. And she was writing in the context of the law, but it can also be extrapolated to really every other force that affects our lives. And so I wanted people to understand that it would be most effective to read this collection with intersectionality in mind.
And you have this wonderful, and it appears in the selection of the texts, but throughout your work, this wonderful ability to both connect in very, I hate the word accessible ways, but to connect with what people see and hear in their everyday lives, and also bring sophisticated concepts to bear on them, like to sort of meet people where they are and then bring them to nuanced and deep understandings of the world around them. And I'm just wondering, in terms of putting this book together, but then also in terms of your relationship with your students, how are you seeing sort of the vision of how to, given our current moment, how to help young people, given the assaults on feminism in every direction, get a foothold?
Well, it's challenging because a lot of young people see the current state of the world and feel like all of our progressive projects are failures.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're failures. It's that, again, we're up against really powerful forces that do not want to cede any of their power or control. And so I try to help them focus on, here are the things that we have done, here are the things that feminism has made possible for each and every one of you.
Yeah.
And we tend to lose sight of those things, like the right to have a credit card in your own name, a bank account, to own a home, to have a no contest divorce. In some states, the right to bodily autonomy. Unfortunately, this is not one such state. And that is disappointing.
Yeah.
It's more than disappointing, though, because it's putting women's lives at risk.
It's horrifying.
And so we have to also then remind them this is why we need feminism more than ever, so that we can get back our bodily autonomy across the country in every single state and territory. And also make sure that we force our democratic leaders to codify our right to bodily autonomy in law.
Yes. Yeah. When did you become a feminist?
It was a cold day in April.
I asked the question like
the year was 1979. No, I was raised by an incredible woman. My mother would always say, "Oh, I'm not a feminist." But she was the most feminist person I've ever met. She was entirely sure of herself. She was brilliant. She could have done absolutely anything. And she always raised me to have a strong sense of self. And to their credit, both of my parents, I think they had some ideas of what they wanted their daughter to be, but they had never told me I couldn't do anything because I was a girl. And so in many ways, I was always a feminist because I always believed that I have as much right as anyone to do the kinds of things that interested me, to like math, for example, which is an easy example, but also to share my opinions. And we were always allowed, and not only allowed, but encouraged at the dinner table every night to talk and to share our opinions about politics and what we were watching on TV 1 hour a week.
But
what we were reading. I mean, it worked out.
Right.
And so to feel like our voices mattered at home helped us to believe that our voices mattered out in the world. So it was always there.
So as a right, so that, I mean, I think it's really important also because to give space for an understanding that feminism, even without the label as such, is at its core about a respect for the human being and of every human being. In this moment, I guess one of the questions that I grapple with, I mean, I have a particular answer, but I'm asking you, is there's this real sense of urgency, like what you're saying, the erosion of basic constitutional rights in every single formulation, and in each one, patriarchy is cutting incredibly deeply, right, in every arena. And so there's this sense of urgency, but then there's also this question about study and interpretation and analysis. And I'm wondering how you think about sort of talking to people about the balance between the two, that we have to act.
We do have to act, but we can't act without a foundation of knowledge, because then anything that we're acting upon is going to be fleeting, temporary.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to be patient and to do the work, but you have to do the work, and you have to know what you're talking about. If you go into political debates, if you go into legislative debates without preparation, you will absolutely not succeed in the long run. And what we're looking for is not just to address some of the urgent concerns, but again, to make sure that we're laying a foundation so that some of the retraction that we're currently experiencing can never happen again. And one of the key ways to do that is to make sure that we absolutely know what we're talking about and that we are well read. And it's interesting to see that we're seeing this sort of foisting of AI upon us right now, because these tech overlords are really trying to take that idea of the depth of knowledge away from us.
That's right.
And how trying to convince everyone that we can outsource that kind of thing. But we can't. There is no computer, there's no technology more powerful than your mind.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And it's interesting, one of the things that you say about the way that some people misread Bad Feminist is that then became an excuse, right? They'd say, oh, they're just going on the title, not the content, right? They say, oh, well, I'm still a feminist even though I do A, B, C, and D. So part of what you're recommending is actually a set of practices and disposition.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things I was thinking through when I wrote Bad Feminist was that sometimes my ideology is inconsistent, or at least my application of it. Like, yes, I'm going to listen to hip hop, and yes, I understand what the lyrics are saying, but I'm literate and I'm media literate, so I am able to contextualize why the music says these things, why it's harmful, and so therefore I feel like, okay, I'm going to give myself a pass. However, a lot of times people read Bad Feminist and then decided that it was a coupon or a carte blanche to do whatever the hell they want and to believe whatever they want. A lot of pro-life women come up to me and say, I'm a bad feminist, but I'm pro-life. And I'm like, then you are just bad. So words mean things. And so a lot of times, now 12 years on, she's a tween, I believe everything I wrote and stand by it, but I also think a lot more about accountability. How do we hold ourselves accountable for the choices that we make when those choices can be harmful, if not to ourselves, then to others? Yeah. So accountability does matter, and making sure that we are all media literate enough to understand the messages and the culture that we're consuming really, really matters. And sometimes people resent having to do that work, but I can assure you, in the long run, you will always be glad you did that work.
Yeah. So how do we think about accountability? Like, there are ways that are, in terms of the question of certain kinds of urgency, right, that have to do with the voting booth, right? And writing to Congress people. But can you talk a little bit about what do you think that accountability looks like on a day-to-day basis for someone who embraces feminism?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's something that we're always trying to negotiate with ourselves and figure out. But one of the key things is that when you see something unjust happening, you have to say something. Yeah. I think a lot of us get very comfortable, and I include myself in this, we get very comfortable in our lives and very comfortable with the privileges that we have, and it's very easy to forget that not everyone has those privileges. Some people will never enjoy them. And that does mean that we have an extra responsibility to advocate for people who need our advocacy the most. And even in our social circles and our familial circles, there are things that we tend to look away from because, oh, she's actually a good person. He doesn't mean that. No, he does. Yeah. And you have to disabuse him of those notions, or her, or they. And so I think that we have to start holding ourselves and our loved ones more accountable for the things that we say, the way that we vote, et cetera, because look what happened. Yeah. How on earth did Donald Trump become president a second time? And he still, even though his numbers are very bad, he still enjoys fairly robust support from his base. Yes. That should tell us all something. We can't dismiss it and pretend that that means everything's going to eventually be okay. It means that there are millions, tens of millions of people in this country who are fine with ICE raids and kidnapping our neighbors and eroding women's rights and attacking the trans community, literally attacking other countries, while he goes around talking about the 8 wars that he stopped. And I'm like, sir, the war is only with your shoelaces. That is the only war you've stopped. Yeah, yeah. And it's so interesting because, right, there's a distinctive just horror to the president. But both in the midst of his trials and in a lot of and in the context of the Epstein files, as someone, in our age cohort, I feel like
we suppress, I remember how every day so much of this was, like there's a way that, so when you say that, you make this point about, holding people accountable or not looking away, I just, that feels very present because so much felt so everyday, and it still is outside of certain kinds of polite company settings. And so I just wonder if there's moments too that we point over there, this is terrible, as opposed to pointing.
Yes, sometimes
here.
The call is coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
And, the thing about the Epstein files is that clearly he had a lot of free time. He was a prolific emailer. And
isn't that remarkable? Right.
It's just like, where did you find the time to send all of these poorly written, grammatically bizarre emails? It's called punctuation and capitalization. And all his little buddies are like, yeah, I also am illiterate. And it's very frustrating.
Yes.
But the Epstein files have shown us that it is not just conservatives who are the problem.
That's right.
I mean, there is one common denominator there: men. And we should probably look at that.
Yeah.
Because men across the political spectrum are very comfortable palling around with a pedophile and sex trafficker.
Yes.
And it shows how little we value women and girls. And it does start in our own communities, our own homes, our own friend groups, when we diminish women, or when we say things like, oh, look at him fighting like a girl, or oh, look at that little, B word. I curse all the time, but I am mindful of television cameras. It's really frustrating because it starts with standing up for women and girls in everything that you do in your day-to-day life. No, don't laugh at that misogynist joke. No, just bark. Like on TikTok right now, there are some young women who are barking when men hit on them. It's awesome. Highly recommend. My algorithm drops me off anywhere, and it's great. And push back. I am not public property. This girl is not public property. That is someone's daughter. But she doesn't have to be someone's daughter. She's actually just herself.
As a person, right.
That's all that we need to know.
Yeah.
And I also think that we have to do more to resist a lot of the ways in which extreme conservatives have shaped the discourse.
That's right, yeah.
They control language and vernacular so well. Mm-hmm. And the fact that we have learned nothing from it over the past 10 years is deeply, deeply alarming to me. Mm-hmm. They send out their little memos and are like, we're going to call the white women in Minnesota who are resisting ICE awful, and they come up with an acronym for that. And before long, everyone's using it.
Yeah.
And that's the most recent example, but we see it all the time.
Even the way they use the misinterpretation of the word woke as an example,
I mean,
right?
They did it with woke. They did it with critical race theory.
Yes.
And we then start to make jokes like, oh, ha, 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 I'm going to go do something DEI today. But is it really funny? Is that the joke that is worth making? Because what you're doing is capitulating. You are ceding the sort of philosophical ground to these ideas when you allow yourself to use them. And these are the kinds of things we absolutely can do in our day-to-day lives that aren't marching, though march, go on the front lines, do your thing, and calling your legislators, which is important, but can feel a bit like screaming into the void at times. Mm-hmm. But we can take these small stands in our day-to-day lives, and we can refuse to allow them to control the discourse.
There's this, when you go into, so frequently, I know you're in airports all the time, as am I, and you go into the bathroom stalls and they have the notice about trafficking. Mm-hmm. And I often think about how we're actually constantly surrounded by gender-based violence or sexual violence. Mm-hmm. And that there are these institutions that uphold it, right? I mean, the sort of industry, the nightclub industry, the strip club industry, the sports industry, we have all of these industries that are surrounding us that we actually participate in and we consume without actually sort of interrogating all of the layers of domination and violence underneath them. And that's part of why I think is so is so good about the collection is that you're actually bringing in texts that help us. Like you have Donna Haraway helping us think about media and all, you know, that these, and I'm wondering about, I guess, so there's a question about the people that we sort of can hold accountable, that we're in relationship with. But I also wonder about the people who are in our midst who we don't have like a relationship of bond or family with, but that we're interacting with across various institutional formations. And if you thought, if you think about like, what is a feminist, approach to, like, we're in hotels here. What does a feminist politic look like in relationship to the folks who are working in the hotel? You know what I mean?
You know, these are important questions, and a lot of us who I do think we believe that we have the right politics, oftentimes have the right politics until it inconveniences us.
Right.
And so thinking of hotels, that's a great example. Are the workers in your hotel unionized?
Right.
That matters. Are they paid a living wage? And it just takes a little bit of a Google search or a phone call to learn these things, and then make your decisions accordingly. But most people don't want to do that work because it's like, well, I'm not going to really change the system.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you will change the system. Look at Target.
It's so good. And they've lost people forever.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not.
We're not going back.
Right.
And I loved Target. I loved it because I went in to buy some Windex and came out with $200 worth of nonsense.
Okay, always.
So
every time.
The fact that they have burned the bridge with Black people and others is kind of a spectacular downfall. And no, the boycott's not over.
No.
Just, that is a fiction and a fantasy. And so, but despite this boycott, many, many people are still shopping at Target.
Right.
Most of us use Amazon.
Right.
Most of us wear clothing that was probably made in a sweatshop, or shoes that were made in a sweatshop. Ethical consumption is really difficult in a capitalist world.
Right.
And so, I think a lot of us try to make as many ethical choices as possible while recognizing that we can't make all the ethical choices. But there are a few people out there, and they love to tell you about it, who only make ethical choices. And I admire that they're doing it.
Yeah.
They are walking the walk, they are talking the talk, and they are loving their raw vegan lifestyle.
But I think this is part of what I think the door that Bad Feminists opened up is, there's these sort of several ways that people feel like they can't do anything, right? One is if there's a model of feminism that it actually isn't about being, it's like a two-dimensional image, it's not about being in relation to other people. And then the other is this idea, well, everything is so sullied, why bother? And so this idea that, okay, but do something, and then also be critical about the something that you're doing, and then being in conversation about it so that it can accumulate. Right? The thing about the Target boycott there was this whole discourse, and it was also on these, these media platforms, which, while fairly horrific in various ways, these sort of corporate platforms, also are places of insurgency, right? So you can be critical of them, but then also figure out ways to be in them, that potentially push in another direction.
Absolutely, because a lot of times real change does happen from the inside. It's not going to happen from external pressure, no matter how much external pressure you apply. But if you can find people who can apply pressure from inside, oftentimes you can see some real change. Now, that said, sometimes I think people do some wish casting onto people, like, oh, that's a good one. He's gonna change the administration. And it's like, no, Marco is out for Marco.
No, definitely not Marco. Who's gonna do that? What about, and I guess that's the other piece that I want to ask, because we have talked a bit about men and the challenges of men, but we also have all of these women, right? And it's fascinating because we have women who are in positions of power who are actually advocating for a patriarchal order in every possible way. And so that the sort of position of power, I guess, is sort of mediated by sort of adopting this visual imagery that is about, a kind of throwback. But I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit about what does it mean to have these women in the front who are demanding the rest of the women be in the back?
These women I'm very interested in them. I'm very intrigued because a lot of what they're doing is just kink, and
but that's real. It's
yes, a lot of it is, and like you can call it whatever you want: Christian domestic discipline, trad wife, whatever. You guys are in a kinky, dominant, submissive relationship with your husband, and you feel bad about that, and so you want the rest of us to do it so that you can feel normal. What is normal anyway? Girl, do your thing. It's fine. And so, I do think we need to talk about that component. And a lot of people overlook it. And I'm not even kidding. I genuinely believe a lot of this is just kink.
Yeah.
And people who have a lot of shame, whether it's from faith-based backgrounds or whatever, conservatism in some way, and they just need a framework.
Yeah.
But also, there are a lot of women who understand power and understand that adjacency to power is better than having no power at all. And so they shroud themselves in the patriarchy, believing that the patriarchy will protect them. It will not.
Yeah.
Believing that they will somehow be more respected because they are espousing the ideology of the patriarchy. It will not happen. And so I understand what they're doing. I find it loathsome.
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing. And people try to dress it up and say it's this, it's that. It's adjacency to power. And they are trying to protect themselves. It's self-preservation. It's preservation for their families and their children. But they're actually not preserving anything. And that is what makes me sad, that they are suffering from such a dearth of imagination that they can't imagine any sort of power beyond the patriarchy. And we'll see what happens. Good luck to them.
But I mean, yes. There's a sort of an analog, and I don't want to overstate this, but that you see it with some women in hip hop, right, where there's an individual trading upon this very, conventionally sexist, patriarchal imagery that allows them to accrue lots of wealth and status. And it almost is like a dissociation from the larger group of women, right?
Yeah.
They get some personal benefit,
yes,
right, in exchange for making other women safe.
Absolutely, and we see this a lot of times with women stars, including our favorites. And I love my favorites, but let's be real. If you haven't worn pants since 2010, you are understanding power and understanding that looks matter and that bodies matter. And the more you display that body, the more you commodify it, the more wealth and power you will accrue. I don't know if you'll accrue respect, but sometimes you can buy your way out of needing respect. It's like those TikTok girls. Obviously, the algorithm and I are like this.
So how do you figure out, because you have your finger on the pulse, how do you manage it? How does it not become overwhelming?
Well, I think it does become overwhelming.
Okay.
It is, especially now in this moment. And back to TikTok, that's what's so dangerous about TikTok. It's in everyone's lives, but the algorithm is absolutely rewarding. For example, these trad wives, that Ballerina Farms woman, God bless her. Congratulations on your 25th child and your bread and your sourdough and so on. But also got people that drink raw milk. It's so dangerous because people treat all of these people on social media more broadly as experts simply because they have access to a phone and internet, and then try truly dangerous things and dangerous ideas. We see this with the manosphere and young men who are just lonely and just need a little guidance and a little care, but they're finding that guidance and care from toxic, dangerous men who tell them to hate women, who tell them to hate people of color, who tell them like that Nazism is good, who believe in all sorts of bizarre anti-Semitic ideas and theories. Like, first of all, monitor what your children are doing on the internet.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean like police them, but no, I do, actually. Because young minds are so supple and they are learning at such a wonderful rate, but if you don't keep an eye on what they're learning, you are going to have a child who is talking to you about the 14 words and you're not even going to know what they're talking about. And so it's really important that we recognize that media literacy starts from preschool.
Yeah.
In age-appropriate ways,
right,
as they grow up. And then it has to be an ongoing project for adults. We have to stay abreast of what's happening and what these people are talking about so that we can, A, inoculate ourselves from really dangerous ideologies, but also inoculate ourselves from just believing that there's only one answer. And I don't know, it's a difficult time.
Well, and it's so interesting because a couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, because they're big now, but I remember my older son talking to me about how watching gaming videos on YouTube was an algorithmic leap to the manosphere. Like he'd say, show, the suggested videos, and he was like, you have to monitor what my little brother is watching because he's watching gaming video. And I was not sophisticated enough to recognize this, and so that there is, and I think in many instances, those of us who are older who are not keeping abreast of what's happening, don't even know necessarily what to look out for. But then there's this other piece that you started to talk about, which I think is really interesting, right? So on the one hand, we have this open space, right? Social media, the internet has allowed for kind of democratic participation in some really dramatic, transformative ways. It also creates this kind of leveling of knowledge, right? Where we think, anybody who, and I actually think that this is more dangerous for older people even, right?
I do.
Right, like
yes.
Everything like looks official, right? But it's so you have this tricky thing because yes, we want a kind of democratic participation, but no, not everybody knows the same thing with the same degree of sophistication.
Correct. And we're also in a time where people in power are trying to devalue expertise.
Yes.
That, just because you read a Wikipedia entry, you're an expert. I don't know how many people watch those videos of those little Nazi boys on Doge explaining why they cut various humanities grants and programs. And one guy really did say that he was an expert because he read a book about a topic. And expertise takes time. It really does. And a lot of times people say, oh, then you're being bigoted in some way by suggesting that if I don't have an education can happen anywhere. Get your free library card and then go read multiple books for multiple years and you will have developed some expertise. And people don't want to hear that. They want the immediacy of reading something brief and pithy. And Wikipedia, for example, is lovely. It offers so much information, and I go down Wikipedia rabbit holes all the time. I know things that no one should know. And
it's much better than it used to be because of the editing function. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's not entirely reliable.
Right.
It is fallible, and you need more. You need to use that as a starting point to then go read actual books printed on paper or a Kindle, that's fine. But it is why I do think even when you're accused of being a snob, et cetera, it is important to talk about expertise. And as someone who has earned a doctoral degree, you know what it takes to get a PhD, and people love to sort of dismiss it, but it took years and years and years, and I read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I had to master 2 languages in addition to English.
Right.
So yes, I'm an expert on what I do.
That's right.
It's just come on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're better.
That's right.
It's not about being better or worse. It's about being different and knowing who to listen to. And there are so many things I know I'm not an expert on. Oftentimes when you write public opinions, people treat you like a little vending machine. And I even write about that in the introduction, that, what are your thoughts on Syria? I think it's bad. I have thoughts, but that's not my area of expertise. There are amazing scholars across the political spectrum who can tell you with real knowledge what's going on in the Middle East. And so my opinion should not matter. And so again, not only is expertise important, but so is discernment.
Yes. And I love that point, because it also is this reminder that part of the kind of competitive logics that we operate in late stage capitalism, where you're supposed to try to hustle for everything, like not everything is for you, and you have to offer you have to be in relation to other people, right? One person isn't the repository for every single thing. But one of the things I really appreciate also about what you're saying is about this kind of complexity and nuance, right? So if we go back to the point about the trad wife kink thing, because there's also this trickiness, right? Because there's a way in which the culture is sort of pornographic in multiple meanings of the word, but we don't want to be Victorians around desire and sexuality, but we also want to be able to track the way these very old patriarchal ideas circulate in that arena of sexuality as it is everywhere, right?
Like, one of the most important things is your kink is okay.
Right.
Do what you want to do, truly. But don't do that and expect everyone else to do that uncritically, and not talk about the very real repercussions of those decisions. When you are ceding your power to someone else, how are you protecting yourself when that person decides that they want to take their power elsewhere? And we don't talk about that a lot. And a lot of these women idealize. Now, I was raised by a mother who stayed at home, and I'm here in this chair today because my mother stayed at home and was there to educate me beyond what the education system was going to provide, to make sure I came home safely all the time, to love me, to give me confidence, to help me go to the library and take too many books home and carry those books home. I mean, I've always been who I am. And so it is not about choosing that. Like, a lot of times these women will say, oh, I should have a right to raise my children. And yes, you should. You should also have a right to be protected if and when your marriage ends.
Yes.
And that you are not immediately with your children thrust into poverty. And so how do we do that? And so I would like us to be able to have more sophisticated conversations about do what you want, but how do you protect yourself and your children if, God forbid, something terrible happens? Because a lot of times something terrible seems to happen to these women, where they are abandoned by their partners who decide that they want a younger model, because the younger you are, the more malleable you are. And the more willing you are to tolerate the intolerable. So, I mean, every time, I'm sorry, but the ballerina farms, when he gave her the egg carrier as the gift, oh my God. I was just like, you know what, girl, leave today.
This is way over my head.
It's okay. It's okay. There are like 12 people here who understand. So the ballerina husband, Daniel, maybe? The names don't matter. But he got his wife a belt that she can put eggs in while she's picking the eggs. And she was like hoping for a trip to Europe. And he's the heir to JetBlue. So like, he could have gotten her the trip to Europe.
Yeah.
They went eventually, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway, these are like soap operas. That's the other thing. A lot of times people don't realize that you're only seeing what they want you to see.
Sure,
There's a book coming out, a novel called Yesteryear by a woman whose name I'm forgetting. And it is a play on sort of what happens behind the scenes of these sort of TikTok first, Instagram first influencers. Highly recommend. It's a wild ride.
Well, to that point, one of the things that I have watched you do that is so wonderful is that you actually are always making space for younger writers who have work that is both excellent but also that is opening doors. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about like how that became part of your work?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I grew up in a family that loved books and loved education. I'm not a first-generation college graduate, which means I come from a place of immense privilege. But I didn't know any writers. I didn't know anyone who knew any writers. So everything I learned about finding ways to put my work into the world, I learned via searching first the library and eventually the internet. And it wasn't that it was hard. It's always hard, but it's meant to be hard. It's not a bad thing that it was hard. But it could be easier. Mm-hmm. It could be easier if we just were a little more open with information and access. And so one of the things I pride myself on as a writer of some repute is being able to create opportunities for other writers and to lift up other writers, because so often in the writing world we approach our craft and the marketing of our craft from a place of scarcity, but we don't have to do that. We're not taking someone else's book deal, they're not taking ours. What is meant for you is meant for you. And what is meant for someone else is meant for someone else. And unfortunately, the ways of the industry and some of the obscure ways in which the industry moves and the way they obfuscate information makes people think that they'll never have a shot. Mm-hmm. But it's just hard to sell books.
Period.
Regardless. Everybody struggles to sell books. And so if I can help writers, whether it's at the essay or story level or at the book level, get a little more recognition for their work, I'm happy to do it, because I know that it's not taking anything away from my readership in any way, shape, or form. And a lot of writers actually act this way. T.R.E. Jones is really good for this. Kiese Layman, Disha Filia, writers in general, and I would say Black writers in particular, are very generous with their time, with their platforms, and with making sure that we recognize that we can lift as many voices as possible.
Yeah, and I feel so important because there's this mythology that came about, right? Part of the backlash to the Black Lives Matter era has been, oh no, like, we had this period where suddenly everything opened up and was easy for Black people.
Oh, so easy.
Right, just not, I mean, so absurdly far from the truth, right? Can't get a book deal if you're a white man anymore. It's like, oh, you could have fooled me.
To this day, I hear white men who will come up to me and say, I know I'm never gonna get a book deal. I'm like, you guys get 90% of all the book deals.
Yes.
You're not getting a book deal because you're not a good writer.
Right, but when that becomes, like you were saying earlier, like when that becomes a thing that circulates and people treat it as though it is true, then it becomes even the necessity to open pathways for people from underrepresented groups becomes even more important, because everybody is operating as though there's advantage where there's disadvantage, which actually leads to an accumulation of disadvantage.
And it's really frustrating. One of the most toxic sort of urban myths, if you will, in the writing community is that Black writers and women writers, queer writers, et cetera, just have it so easy, that there's this golden path to publication and publishers are throwing money at you. It's not true. This is not happening. It never happened, not even during the height of Black Lives Matter.
Not at all. Maybe
certain writers got deals and those deals were well publicized, but that's just publicity. That's not reality. And it's really frustrating when resentful writers claim that there are industry-wide conspiracies preventing them from success, when perhaps the truth is closer to home. Now, that said, it is hard. It's also hard. It's unfair. Not everyone gets the opportunities that they deserve. And there are many, many excellent writers who do not get the book deal that they deserve, who do not get the attention that they deserve. And we can acknowledge that while also acknowledging that the conspiracy theory isn't that marginalized people are getting something that you're not.
Yeah.
The conspiracy is that billion-dollar corporations are creating unnecessary and false scarcity, because that's how they operate.
Yes. Now, part of your story that I think, and I don't know, I tend to think people know this, but I think it's really extraordinary, is that you actually entered the world of writing through new media, right?
Through new media?
Through blogging. That was your entry. Yes.
Yes.
And so you also took advantage of a way that the world was opening up to find your way. And I'm wondering if where do you see in the present landscape like the interesting, innovative, politically meaningful work coming out?
It's a little tough right now. RIP Google Reader. Oh, I miss it. It was so great. But newsletters are doing some interesting things. And what I do enjoy about a good newsletter is that it comes directly to your inbox and you can read it at your leisure. Social media, TikTok is actually, even though it's not writing, there's amazing storytelling happening and amazing sort of collaborations between different kinds of artists and thinkers. And oftentimes that will then lead you to something else that they've done. But it is hard. Blogging was a great time and a great moment, and people are still blogging, but it is not the force that it once was. I also think a lot of people are trying new things, new old things, like zines are coming back.
That's
and
awesome.
a lot of times people are stepping away from technology and doing lo-fi, handmade, awesome things. And I oftentimes receive these as gifts from fans and readers at events, and I love it. And because it's like, oh, there are only 5 copies of this thing, but man, it's so interesting and it's so great. And I love that people are just always going to create. People are always going to tell stories. How we do it, the tools that we use to do it will change, but the reality that people want to share their stories will never change. And that's important to also remember in a time when we're often told, oh, people don't read, blah, blah, blah. Like, maybe not enough people read, that's for sure, but a lot of people do read. A lot of people read. They may not read what we want them to read. Romantasy is very popular. And that's fine. They're reading.
Reading matters, yeah.
And yes, it's about something we may not personally choose, but I love that people are reading. Heated Rivalry, great book. Very, very educational. I liked it.
What you just said reminded me a little bit of I remember hearing a talk given by another extraordinary Haitian-American writer, Edwidge Danticat, where she said, someone asked her in the audience, you know, what kind of books were in your home when you were growing up? And she was like, she's like, we didn't have books in my home, but what we did have was storytelling. And the way that she wove the story, and I think the story is now in her book, Create Dangerously, it was in those lectures that I saw. And one of the things that was clear in the way that she was talking about it is the function of storytelling as a kind of moral instruction, as a kind of or as a way of developing critical thought. And I'm saying all of that as a roundabout way to ask you a question about where are you at in terms of your writing right now? Like, what are you working, if you want to talk about it, what are you working on, and what feels imperative for you?
What am I working on? So I've been dealing with
this question.
Very challenging writing block for several years now, with good reason. The past several years in my family have been really difficult, and so it's not that I was distracted, but I suppose I would say I was consumed. And so it has been hard to figure out how to write the things that I want to write, but I am working on several books. Including a book of writing advice that will be out next year called How to Be Heard. Ooh. And part of the reason I was sort of dragging my heels on this book is because I was reading a lot of other books of writing advice, and a lot of other writers approach writing advice in a very sort of like spiritual way. Like, you feel the creativity embody you and blah, blah, blah. And that's not my ministry. And so I've been trying to figure out, how do I write this book in my voice, the way I want to? And so I'm trying to now just get out of my own way and say what I want to say. And I've been like taping myself when I'm teaching, because I'm very good at that. And I am able to articulate to my students how they should be approaching their craft. And so I'm drawing from that, and it's been a lot of fun now that the dam has broken to figure out how I actually want to write this book. And then I'm writing a sort of grief memoir about the loss of my mother. And this is a book, what do you write when you have several past due projects? Something no one asked for. So that's my no one asked for it, but I'm gonna write it anyway project. And then I'm writing a romance novel with a young man named Channing Tatum. And, and it's very sexy, and it's very fun, and sometimes you need a fun project to temper the more serious projects.
I just like to say, you said, I'm in a writer's block, and then you gave us 3 extraordinary projects that you're working on.
Nobody believes me that I'm blocked, but it's a block. Yes, I've been writing and I've been putting stuff in the world, but it's not the best version of my work. And I know what my best is, and I know what my okay is, and I'm trying to get past okay back to my best.
Yeah. Do you feel,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, but also thank you for doing that I think you know how much your work means for so many people, and sort of to live, to face grief, and to offer something about it to a broader is an act of extraordinary love.
Oh, thank you. It feels like an act of love because my mother was an incredible woman and taught me so much of what I know and affected so many people. And we were very fortunate in that, especially in the last few years of her life, she benefited from immunotherapy and an amazing clinical trial for a drug that is now in the market called Tagrisso for lung cancer, and it gave her 5 years that she would not have had otherwise. And we did not waste a single moment, and so we went kind of around the world, my brother and his wife, and my wife and I, and my dad and my mom, and to be able to have those experiences with my parents was such a gift, to know that nothing was left unsaid, to know that there were no regrets, to know that I honored her in the best ways that I could while she was here. It's amazing, and so I'm writing about it because if nothing else, it was a gift to myself, but I think it was a gift for all of us to be able to share these times together. And sometimes, like, I would tell someone, oh yeah, we're going on a trip again, and they would be like, your whole family? Yes, we're Haitian. It is what it is. We're going together. And we still travel with my dad. He's coming with us. We're going to well, I don't know anymore. We're going to the Middle East, but I don't think that's happening anymore, unfortunately. But what's far more unfortunate, of course, are the people who have to live there.
Yeah. So this is not an easy question, but I think it's one that you can actually help us with and offer something, because you just gave what I think, by talking about your experience, gave beautiful advice to those of us who are in the process of saying goodbye to people we love, which is about being present, and the importance, and saying the things that you don't want to have left unsaid. What about some advice for us as we move through, and you've offered some already, but as we go out in this world that is now, in the society that is now, a warmongering society that is filled with deception and lies, and it's kind of a cesspool right now. And we often feel like we don't even know where to begin. And I would love for you to offer something, as these folks who are going to all these wonderful sessions and seeing their favorite writers, just something maybe even small for them to take with them. Well,
one of the key things to remember is that alongside the grief and the pain and the horror of the current moment, lovely, lovely things are happening. People are doing the most wonderful and interesting things. Minneapolis, and the way in which not only people in Minneapolis but in Minnesota really just said, no, you are not going to do this, was remarkable. And they, alongside people in Chicago, Los Angeles, and all of the other cities where ICE is engaging in what will ultimately be decreed illegal activities, they gave us a template. And so resistance is absolutely possible. and it works. But also on a less political level, joy does matter. And we have to remember that it can't only be focusing on the losses when we are also seeing gains and successes. I think the midterms are going to be very interesting, and I'm not a seer, so I can't say how it's going to turn out, but I do think the midterms are going to be very crucial and important. And oftentimes when we're talking about even the littlest moment of hope, people immediately start to rain down with doom scrolling information. So step away from your phones and the doom scrolling, because it's not going to soothe the anxiety of, is everything going to be okay? But what will soothe that anxiety is, you know, coming out to events like this, I mean the book fair, not this specific event, and seeing how amazing thinkers and writers are putting themselves into the world, reading beautiful books, enjoying this absolutely gorgeous day here in Louisiana, New Orleans specifically. So just remember, like, life is worth living, and you are not going to help anyone who is suffering by suffering yourself.
On that beautiful note, please thank Roxane Gay.
Thank you.